Welcome to Mind Set in Stone podcasts, where we dive deep into the most compelling books on the shelf. Join hosts Dave and Poppy as they uncover the stories, themes, and ideas that shape our understanding and inspire curiosity. Get ready to explore the big ideas that leave a lasting impact. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Mindset in Stone podcast. So I want you to picture this. It is the final seconds of Super Bowl 49. The Seattle Seahawks are trailing the New England Patriots by, I think, just 4 points, right?
Yep, 4 points, and there are only 26 seconds left on the clock.
So Seattle has the ball right on the Patriots' 1-yard line. And literally every single person watching, including the entire Patriots defense, expects Seahawks coach Pete Carroll to hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch.
Right, because he's, one of the most punishing, powerful running backs in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, it's a short yardage situation. It seems like an absolute sure thing. But Carroll calls the play, and he doesn't hand the ball off. He calls for quarterback Russell Wilson to throw a pass.
And that pass is intercepted by Malcolm Butler.
Yep. The
Patriots win the Super Bowl, and the media response the next morning was just absolute brutal.
It was a bloodbath.
Yeah, they universally labeled it as the worst play call in NFL history.
It was complete devastation for Seattle. But when you really dig into the core concepts from Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets, which is the focus of our deep dive today, a completely different perspective emerges.
It really does.
Because you have to ask, was that actually a bad decision? Or are we just, blinded by a bad outcome?
If you step back and look at the actual mathematics of that specific situation, Pete Carroll's decision was actually incredibly sound.
Wait, really? Most people still think it was a terrible call.
I know, but look at the data. In the previous 15 NFL seasons, the interception rate for a pass attempted from the opponent's 1-yard line was about 2%. Carroll was managing the clock. He knew the Patriots were geared up in a heavy formation to stuff a run play, and he just played the probabilities.
Right.
He made a highly strategic, mathematically sound decision, but he was dealt a terrible 2% result.
See, that is a really difficult pill to swallow, because our instinct is always to look at a failure and assume the process that led to it was inherently flawed. To really succeed, whether it's in business or relationships or, personal finance, we have to sever that link. We have to stop confusing the quality of the decision with the quality of its outcome.
Yeah, and if we can't judge our choices purely by how they turn out, we have to fundamentally rethink the game we are playing in life.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we tend to navigate our careers and relationships as if we are playing chess. In chess, all the pieces are visible on the board. There's no hidden information. There are no dice to roll.
Right. Luck doesn't really play a part.
Exactly. Luck plays a negligible role. If you lose a game of chess, it's because there was a theoretically better move that you just missed. You can work backward from the outcome, analyze the board, and pinpoint your exact mistake.
But, and this is where John von Neumann comes in, the legendary mathematician and father of game theory, he pointed out that life is nothing like chess. He argued that life is poker.
Yes, poker is a game of incomplete information.
It's driven by risk, uncertainty, and a heavy dose of luck. Like, you can play a hand flawlessly, make the best possible statistical choice, and still lose all your chips because a card is drawn completely at random.
And when we forget that life is poker, we fall into this massive cognitive trap that poker players call resulting. Resulting is the dangerous habit of judging the quality of a decision entirely by its outcome.
So just to put that into perspective for you listening, it's like someone driving home drunk and managing to pull into their driveway safely without crashing.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. The outcome was technically good. They survived. They didn't hurt anyone. But that does not mean getting behind the wheel drunk was a good decision.
Obviously not.
It would be totally absurd for that person to wake up the next morning and conclude they should drive drunk every weekend just because it worked out that one time.
That analogy highlights the absurdity of resulting perfectly. And the crazy thing is, we see this play out in corporate environments constantly.
Oh, all the time.
There is a really well-known story of a CEO who fired his company president. And before making the call, the CEO consulted his board, he analyzed competitor data, he even brought in executive coaches to try and salvage the president's performance.
So he did his homework.
Exactly. He systematically considered alternative roles for him within the company. It was an exhaustive, deeply rational process. But afterward, the search for a replacement was a complete disaster.
Let me guess, sales dropped.
Sales fell, company morale tanked. and they just couldn't find anyone remotely as competent as the guy they had just fired.
So the CEO ends up regretting the choice to fire him, simply because the aftermath was chaotic.
Precisely. When asked later about his worst decisions of the year, the CEO pointed to firing that president. He was agonizing over it.
But he wasn't actually regretting a bad decision.
No. His decision-making process was rigorous and data-driven. He was simply suffering from hindsight bias caused by a bad outcome he was resulting.
Knowing this, a really practical way to apply this insight today is to actively catch yourself resulting when you face your next personal or professional setback.
Yeah, you have to monitor it.
Exactly. So let's say you lose a major client this week, or a marketing campaign completely flops. Instead of immediately punishing yourself, force a separation between the process and the result.
Right. Look at the data you had at the time.
Evaluate the data and the options you had at the exact moment you made the choice. If the process was sound based on what you knew then, you have to let yourself off the hook for the bad outcome.
You really do. Because life is poker, and because hidden information and luck are always at play, every single choice we make is actually a bet on an uncertain future.
Now that word bet usually carries some heavy baggage.
It does, yeah.
Most people associate it with zero-sum gambling in a casino, where one person wins and the house takes the rest.
That is the traditional view, sure, but in the context of decision-making, most of our bets are not against a casino or even against another person.
Who are they against then?
Most of our bets are against all the future versions of ourselves that we are actively choosing not to pursue.
Oh, wow. That's a heavy way to look at it.
Yeah. When you accept a new job offer, you are betting your time, your energy, and your career trajectory on that specific company. By doing so, you are simultaneously betting against the future, where you stayed at your old job, or the future where you move to a different industry altogether.
There is a legendary story from the poker world that illustrates how poorly we sometimes make these bets against our future selves. It involves John Hennigan, a high-stakes gambler known as Johnny World.
Oh, I love this story.
It's so good. So he was a completely nocturnal creature who lived for the adrenaline of Las Vegas. One night, he's playing poker, and the guys at the table start talking about Des Moines, Iowa.
Which is pretty much the opposite of Vegas.
Exactly. To these Vegas gamblers, Des Moines sounded completely alien, so they challenge him. They bet Johnny $30,000 that he could not move to Des Moines and live a normal, quiet life for just 1 month.
But there were rules, right?
Yeah, he was confined to a single designated street that only had one hotel, one restaurant, and a bar that closed early.
It was essentially a sensory deprivation experiment for an action junkie.
That is exactly what it was. So Johnny takes the bet, flies to Iowa, and moves into the hotel. And this grand experiment in endurance lasts a grand total of 2 days. After just 48 hours, Johnny World is in such a state of misery that he calls his poker buddies and offers to pay them $15,000 just to buy his way out of the bet early.
That is amazing. But it shows how Johnny made a significant bet on a future version of himself. He weighed the potential $30,000 payout against the opportunity cost of missing out on the action in Vegas.
He assumed he could handle it.
Right, he assumed his future self could handle the sheer boredom. But he lacked critical information about his own psychological limits. And we do this constantly.
We really do.
We bet our money, our limited time, and our energy on unproven assumptions about what will actually bring us satisfaction.
Which means we need to fundamentally reframe how we view our daily choices. Whenever you're deciding whether to stay in a relationship, order a heavy meal for lunch, or even just sit on the couch scrolling through social media for an hour, you should ask yourself,
what future version of myself am I betting on?
exactly. What future version of myself am I betting my limited resources on right now?
But that raises a major psychological hurdle. If every decision is a bet on the future, those bets are only as reliable as the underlying beliefs they are built upon.
And our beliefs aren't exactly flawless.
No, the cognitive psychology behind how humans actually form beliefs is deeply unsettling.
Most of us assume we operate like computers. We think we hear a piece of information, we logically evaluate whether it's true or false, and only then do we decide to believe it or discard it.
That is the rational ideal, but our evolutionary wiring dictates a completely different sequence. The way we actually form beliefs happens in 3 steps.
Okay, what are they?
First, we hear something. Second, we instantly believe it to be true.
Instantly.
And third, and only sometimes if we have the time, energy, or inclination, we might eventually vet it and figure out if it was actually true or false.
That is terrifying.
From an evolutionary standpoint, Early humans didn't have time to critically evaluate every rustle in the bushes. Assuming it was a tiger kept you alive. Skepticism took too long.
But wait, surely that evolutionary glitch doesn't apply to complex modern information. I mean, if you are a highly educated person who is great at analyzing data, you must naturally be better at spotting false information and correcting your beliefs, right?
You would certainly think so. But Dan Kahan, a researcher at Yale, completely dismantled that assumption.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He studied how people's ability to process math and data, their numeracy, affected their beliefs. He found that being highly numerate actually makes people worse at objective analysis when the topic is highly emotional or tied to their political or social identity.
That sounds completely counterintuitive. How does being smarter make you worse at finding the truth?
Because highly intelligent people possess more intellectual firepower to rationalize their pre-existing beliefs.
Oh, wow.
They are simply better at spinning the data to fit what they already want to be true. This is known as motivated reasoning.
So they use their intelligence as a shield.
Exactly. We are biologically wired to protect our beliefs because they form the foundation of our identity. When our beliefs are challenged, our brain literally registers it as a threat to our survival.
This perfectly explains why we walk around carrying so many unquestioned myths. For years, I firmly believed that male pattern baldness was passed down exclusively from the maternal grandfather.
A lot of people still believe that.
Or that one dog year equates to exactly 7 human years. We just absorb these fragments of information, accept them instantly, and then build complex decisions on top of them without ever taking 30 seconds to verify if they are factually accurate.
Yeah. To combat this, we need a mechanism to force ourselves out of absolute certainty. One of the most effective tools for this is what Annie Duke calls the wanna bet test.
I find this concept brilliant. So the next time you are sitting in a boardroom and you state a fact or a strategy with absolute unquestioned certainty, pause and imagine a colleague slides across the table, looks you dead in the eye, and says, "Wanna bet?"
Suddenly, you are forced to actually evaluate the risk.
Right, you have to put money on it.
It instantly shifts your brain out of its defensive posture and into an analytical one. You begin to ask yourself what information you might be missing and what the other person might know that you don't.
But let me challenge that for a second. If I'm leading a team, and instead of saying this strategy will work, I say, I am 70% confident this strategy will work, won't my team or my bosses interpret that as weakness or a lack of conviction?
It's a common fear, but the reality is the exact opposite. Communicating in percentages actually builds immense credibility.
How so?
It signals to your team that you have rigorously evaluated the risks and the potential downsides. It also creates a safer environment for your team to bring you contradictory information because you haven't tied your entire ego to being 100% right.
Okay, so we calibrate our beliefs, we start thinking in percentages, and we place our bets. Eventually, the wheel stops spinning and the outcome rolls in. But now we hit another psychological wall. How do we objectively figure out if the result we got was due to our own brilliant skill or if it was just blind luck?
This is where the ego fiercely intervenes through something called the self-serving bias. This is our innate tendency to take full credit for our successes, attributing them entirely to our own skill, intelligence, and hard work.
While ignoring luck.
Exactly. Simultaneously, we blame all of our failures on bad luck, unfair circumstances, or other people.
There is a story in the book about a poker player named Nick the Greek that perfectly highlights this delusion.
Oh, this guy's a classic case.
Right. Nick would frequently play a mathematically terrible starting hand, a 7 and a 2 of different suits.
Which anyone who knows poker knows you fold that hand instantly.
Instantly. But Nick would play it. Naturally, most of the time he lost. And he would put on a show, loudly complaining to the table about how incredibly unlucky he was.
Classic resulting.
But on the rare statistical anomaly where he actually won a pot with that garbage hand, he would claim it was a triumph of his strategic genius and his masterful use of surprise.
His ego was running an active filter on reality. And the scary part is, we all do this to protect our self-esteem.
It's just human nature.
Yeah. In the 1950s, there was a landmark psychological study called They Saw a Game. Researchers took students from Dartmouth and Princeton and showed them the exact same film of a highly contentious, incredibly violent football game between their two schools.
Okay, so they all saw the same footage.
Exactly the same. Afterward, the students were asked to count the penalties. The Princeton students literally saw the Dartmouth team commit twice as many flagrant fouls as their own team.
And let me guess, the Dartmouth students saw it differently.
The Dartmouth students watching the exact same footage perceived both teams committing an equal number of infractions. Their tribal biases and ego didn't just color their opinions. It literally altered their visual perception of physical reality.
That is wild. So if our ego is capable of hallucinating reality to protect us, simply trying to, be more humble isn't going to cut it. We need a behavioral intervention.
Yes.
A powerful way to break the self-serving bias is to practice perspective taking, particularly with your competitors.
This is crucial.
The next time a peer achieves a massive success and you feel that bitter, jealous urge to write it off as they just got lucky, force yourself to flip the script. Ask yourself, if I had achieved this exact same result, what specific, brilliant skills would I claim caused it?
Forcing yourself to be a generous credit giver rewires your brain to accurately identify the skills required to win, rather than just dismissing them out of spite.
Perspective taking is vital, but trying to battle your own ego in isolation is nearly impossible.
Yeah, our internal biases are simply too strong. To truly cultivate objectivity, we must actively recruit a squad.
Right, you need backup.
We have to move out of the traditional echo chamber where our friends just nod and validate our feelings and instead build what is known as a truth-seeking pod.
A truth-seeking pod. I love that term. So a truth-seeking pod is basically a group of trusted peers who agree to a very specific, almost uncomfortable social contract. The primary rule is that accuracy is always rewarded over ego preservation.
Yes. You are intentionally fostering exploratory thought rather than confirmatory thought. You want people who will dissect your logic, not just validate your emotions.
David Letterman had a really profound realization about this. He was interviewing Lauren Conrad on his late-night show, and the conversation quickly became tense.
I remember that, yeah.
At one point, she directly asked him if he was calling her an idiot. Letterman later reflected on the incident and admitted that for years he had operated under the default assumption that everyone around him was an idiot.
Which is a terrible way to live.
But he finally had this moment of clarity where he asked himself, what are the statistical odds that everyone else in the world is an idiot? Maybe I'm the idiot.
That level of vulnerability is the exact foundation required for a truth-seeking pod to function. You have to be willing to entertain the possibility that your logic is flawed.
You have to accept you might be the idiot.
Exactly. The legendary physicist Richard Feynman championed a concept that is perfect for these groups, which is outcome blindness.
Outcome blindness.
Yeah, when you go to your pod for advice on a past decision, you must intentionally shield them from the outcome of the story. Do not tell them if the project succeeded or failed.
Because if you tell them it failed, their hindsight bias will automatically kick in, and they will only look for your mistakes.
Yes, and if you tell them it was a massive success, the halo effect will make them call you a genius, even if your process was terrible.
That makes total sense. By withholding the outcome, you force your peers to evaluate the raw quality of your decision-making process based only on the information you had at the time.
Exactly. It keeps them honest.
And make this actionable with your peers. You can establish a decision swear jar, pair up with a trusted colleague, and agree to call each other out whenever you use absolute words like always, never, or 100%.
That's a great practical step.
You also hold each other accountable for complaining about bad luck without first taking responsibility for the choices that put you in that position. It gamifies the pursuit of truth.
So we utilize truth-seeking pods to rely on our peers in the present. But we can also utilize mental time travel to recruit our past and future selves, specifically to prevent impulsive, emotional decisions.
Mental time travel. This ties into a state of mind poker players refer to as tilt, doesn't it?
It does.
Tilt is an intensely emotional state where the zoom lens of the present moment completely distorts your broader reality. You get a flat tire on the way to work, and suddenly the zoom lens makes you declare it's the worst day ever.
You lose all perspective.
Right, and you start making a cascade of irrational, angry choices. You are heavily discounting the future because your immediate, temporary emotions are driving the car.
Psychologists refer to this as temporal discounting. We prioritize the immediate relief or gratification of the present self while entirely disregarding the heavy cost that the future self will have to pay.
There is a classic Jerry Seinfeld stand-up routine about Night Jerry versus Morning Jerry that captures temporal discounting perfectly.
That bit is brilliant.
It's so true to life. Night Jerry wants to stay up until 2 in the morning watching television and eating junk food. Night Jerry doesn't care about the consequences because he isn't the one who has to wake up early. He leaves the exhaustion and the headache for Morning Jerry.
Morning Jerry is the victim.
Exactly. Then the alarm goes off at 6 in the morning, and Morning Jerry is absolutely miserable, plotting revenge against Night Jerry. We constantly allow our emotional present self to sabotage our future self.
Which is precisely why we must forcefully drag our future self into the present moment before we finalize a decision.
Now, my initial thought is that this is where positive visualization comes in. We are constantly told by self-help gurus that if we clearly envision a successful future, we are far more likely to achieve our goals.
It is a massive industry, but the neurological science completely contradicts it. Gabrielle Oettingen has spent decades studying the effects of positive visualization. She discovered that indulging in positive fantasies actually hinders goal achievement.
Wait, how is that possible? Does visualizing success somehow sap our motivation?
That is exactly what happens on a neurological level. When you vividly visualize success, your brain releases dopamine, tricking itself into feeling the reward of the achievement as if it has already happened.
Oh, so your brain thinks the work is done.
Exactly. Because the brain feels satisfied, it lowers your blood pressure and saps the physical energy and motivation required to actually do the hard work.
That's completely backward from what everyone tells you to do.
I know. To combat this, Oettingen developed mental contrasting. You start by imagining the goal, but then you must aggressively contrast it by visualizing the specific, realistic obstacles and brutal failures that will inevitably stand in your way.
So mental contrasting shifts the brain from a state of satisfied rest into a state of active problem solving.
Yes, it prepares you for reality.
A great daily habit to implement this kind of mental time travel is the 10-10-10 rule. When you feel yourself going on tilt, maybe you receive a passive-aggressive email or your flight gets canceled, pause and ask yourself, will this event matter in 10 minutes? Will it matter in 10 months? Will it genuinely matter in 10 years?
It forces you to pull back that emotional zoom lens and view the event with proper proportion.
And for larger, high-stakes decisions, you can conduct a pre-mortem. Before you launch a new product or decide to change careers, close your eyes and imagine it is 1 year in the future. The project has been a catastrophic, embarrassing failure.
It's the opposite of a postmortem.
Right. Working backward from that imagined disaster, meticulously list every single reason why it failed. Then return to the present day and build a concrete plan to mitigate those exact risks before they happen.
That is such a powerful tool.
This has been a truly perspective-shifting deep dive. Let's summarize the core insights we've unpacked today. First, we have to accept that life is poker, not chess. It is driven by hidden information and luck. We must stop resulting. We have to evaluate the quality of our decisions separately from the outcomes they produce. Every choice we make is a bet against our future selves, and those bets rely on beliefs that are often formed without vetting. Furthermore, we have to fight the self-serving bias by building truth-seeking pods that value accuracy over ego, and we must utilize mental time travel to escape the blinding emotions of the present.
Building on those insights, here is a direct challenge for you, the listener. Think of a recent bad outcome in your life, a missed promotion, a failed project, or a fractured relationship that you have been entirely blaming on bad luck or on the actions of someone else.
This is a tough one.
It is, but it's necessary. Open your journal today and write down what percentage of that outcome was truly out of your control. Then, and more importantly, rigorously list the specific decision points along the way that were entirely within your control.
Do not let these concepts fade into the background. Your call to action this week is to reach out to one trusted friend or colleague and ask them to be your decision buddy. Put that decision swear jar into practice.
Start calling out each other's biases.
Demand outcome blindness when discussing past choices, and watch your long-term success fundamentally transform.
And as a final thought to leave you with, embracing the idea that life is poker shouldn't be terrifying. It should actually be profoundly liberating, because when you accept that you cannot control every variable and that luck will always play a role, it gives you permission to be kinder and more forgiving to yourself when things inevitably go wrong. You no longer have to carry the burden of perfection. You only have to carry the responsibility of making the best bet you can with the cards you hold.
We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a spark of inspiration. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and check back for more episodes as we dive into new worlds of thought, one book at a time. Until then, keep your mind set in stone and your curiosity open. This has been a Big L Riz Media podcast, where big ideas meet lasting impressions.